The man took one look at her and rode away. No explanation, no apology, just the sound of hooves disappearing into dust. Mara Collins stood alone on that Arizona platform, carrying everything she owned and a heart that had been broken too many times to count. But this time, something shifted. This time, she refused to crumble. What she did next, the choice she made in that moment of complete rejection, would change not just her life, but the life of a dying man and an entire town that thought they knew what worthless looked like. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The train's whistle cut through the desert air like a blade, sharp and final. Mara Collins gripped the handle of her worn carpet bag tighter, feeling the sweat gather between her fingers despite the dry heat. Through the smudged window, she could see the platform, a stretch of sun-bleached wood that looked like it might splinter under the weight of too much hope. She'd read his letters so many times the paper had gone soft at the creases. Dear Miss Collins, I'm a man of simple means but honest intention. Arizona is hard country, but it rewards those willing to work. I believe we could build something good here together. Simple words, nothing flowery. That's what had made her believe them. The train lurched to a stop, and Mara stood, smoothing down the front of her dress, the nicest one she owned, though it pulled tight across her shoulders and hips in a way that made her feel exposed. She'd tried to fix it last week, letting out seams that had nothing left to give. Her mother's voice echoed in her head, that familiar mix of concern and disappointment. Mara, honey, maybe you should write back and tell him the truth about how you look. Save yourself the heartache. But she had been truthful. She'd sent a photograph. He'd seen her face, her build, the reality of her. And he'd written back anyway, hadn't he? That had to mean something. The conductor, a thin man with a tobacco-stained mustache, barely glanced at her as she stepped down onto the platform. The Arizona sun hit her like a physical thing, aggressive, unrelenting, the kind of heat that didn't care about your circumstances. It just burned. She scanned the small crowd gathered at the station. A young couple embracing, an older man loading crates onto a wagon. A woman in a blue dress shielding her eyes as she searched the arriving passengers. And there, standing apart from the others, holding his hat in his hands, was a man who matched the description in the letters. Tall, sandy hair, clean-shaven, Thomas Garrett. Their eyes met across the platform. Mara's heart hammered in her chest as she picked up her bag and started toward him. She tried to smile, but her lips felt strange, uncertain. He wasn't smiling back. His expression was, she couldn't quite read it. Surprise, maybe. Confusion? She stopped a few feet away from him, suddenly aware of how much space her body took up, how the sun seemed to spotlight every flaw she'd spent her life trying to minimize. Mr. Garrett? Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. He stared at her, not at her face, through it, past it, like he was trying to reconcile what stood in front of him with whatever image he'd constructed in his mind. The photograph had been truthful, but photographs were flat things. They didn't show the way fabric strained or the full reality of a person in 3 dimensions. You're... He cleared his throat, looked away. You're Mara Collins? The question landed like an accusation. Yes. She shifted the carpet bag to her other hand, trying to stand straighter. I got your last letter 2 weeks ago. You said to come on the 15th, so The photograph was old. Not a question, a statement. It was taken 8 months ago, Mr. Garrett. I look the same, but she could see it in his eyes. The calculation, the disappointment, the rapid reconstruction of his future without her in it. She'd seen that look before. At church socials, when she'd arrive and watch young men's faces fall. At family gatherings, when distant relatives would pull her mother aside and whisper advice about realistic expectations. That look was a language she'd learned to read fluently by the time she was 15. Thomas Garrett put his hat back on his head. I think there's been a misunderstanding. What kind of misunderstanding? She heard the edge in her own voice, the years of swallowed humiliation sharpening into something harder. I was clear in my letters about needing a wife who could... He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound as cruel as his thoughts. Who could manage the physical demands of ranch life? Someone suitable. I can work. The words came out firm. I've worked my whole life. I'm strong. Miss Collins? He cut her off, his tone taking on a practiced patience, like he was explaining something simple to someone simple. I need to be direct. This won't do. I'm sorry you came all this way, but I can't. I won't. He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. The blank space where his commitment should have been said everything. Mara felt something crack inside her chest. Not her heart, that had weathered too much to break from one man's rejection, but something else. Some final, fragile belief that honesty might be enough. That maybe, somewhere, there was a place where her worth wasn't measured in pounds and inches. I see. Her voice was steady, which surprised her. And what am I supposed to do now? Thomas shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. Behind him, the woman in the blue dress was watching them, her expression a mix of curiosity and pity that made Mara's skin crawl. There's a boarding house in town, Mrs. Henderson's place. She takes in... He fumbled for his wallet, pulled out a few bills. This should cover a few nights while you figure out your arrangements. He held the money out to her like it was a solution, like it erased the promises he'd made on paper, the future he'd sketched out in careful handwriting. Mara looked at the bills, then at his face. She didn't take the money. Keep it, she said quietly. I'll manage. For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Shame, maybe, or the ghost of the decent man who'd written those letters. But it passed quickly. He pocketed the money with visible relief, already turning away, already erasing her from his story. Good luck to you, Miss Collins. He walked to where his horse was tied, a decent mare, well kept, and mounted up with easy grace. He didn't look back as he rode away, didn't hesitate or reconsider, just left her standing there with her carpet bag and the ruins of every stupid, stubborn hope she'd carried across 3 states. The platform was clearing out. The couple had left. The old man and his crates were gone. Even the woman in blue had turned away, her curiosity satisfied. Mara stood alone in the brutal sunshine, feeling the weight of every stare that had already passed over her, every conclusion that had already been drawn. This was the moment she was supposed to break. This was where the story ended, another fat girl with foolish dreams learning the hard lessons of reality. She could feel it waiting for her, that familiar spiral into shame and surrender. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the anger, clean and sharp, cutting through the usual fog of self-doubt. Maybe it was the fact that she'd spent every penny she had on the train ticket, burned every bridge back home, and had nothing left to lose. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe she was just tired of being the one who disappeared, who crumbled, who accepted the world's verdict without appeal. Mara picked up her carpetbag and started walking. Not toward the town with its boarding house and pitying glances, not back to the train that would carry her home to her mother's knowing sighs and her sister's carefully neutral comments. She walked away from the platform, away from the small cluster of buildings that made up the town, toward the open land beyond. She'd heard them talking on the train, 2 men in the seats behind her, their voices carrying in that careless way of people who don't think they're being heard. They'd been discussing ranches, water rights, the hard reality of making a living in this country. One of them had mentioned a place out past the North Ridge, a ranch that had belonged to a man named Turner. Probably dead by now, one had said. Ain't nobody seen him in months. Place is going to ruin. Mara had tucked that information away without knowing why. Now she knew. If there was an abandoned ranch, there might be shelter. And if there was shelter, she could figure out the rest. She'd done harder things than survive alone. Or at least she'd try. The walk was longer than she'd expected. The heat pressed down on her like a hand, and her dress stuck to her back with sweat. Her carpetbag grew heavier with each step, the handle digging into her palm. She had to stop twice to rest, sitting on rocks that burned through her skirts, drinking sparingly from the canteen she'd filled at the train station. The landscape was harsh, but not barren. Scrub brush and tough grass, the occasional twisted tree that had learned to survive on spite and stubbornness. In the distance, dark mountains rose against the pale sky, their peaks sharp enough to cut. The land had a stripped-down honesty to it that Mara found almost comforting. Nothing here pretended to be soft. By the time she spotted the ranch, the sun had started its slow descent toward evening. The buildings appeared gradually, emerging from the landscape like bones from sand. A main house, small and weathered. A barn with a sagging roof. A few outbuildings in various states of collapse. The place looked exactly like what it was, dying. Mara approached slowly, unsure what she'd find. The yard was overgrown with weeds. A broken wagon wheel lay half buried near the barn. The whole place had the hollow feeling of abandonment, like it had been holding its breath for too long. She climbed the 3 steps to the porch, testing each board before putting her full weight on it. The front door was closed, but not locked. She knocked anyway, waiting in the silence that followed. Nothing. She knocked again, louder. "If you're looking to rob the place," a voice rasped from inside, "you're wasting your time. Ain't nothing left worth taking." Mara's heart jumped. Not abandoned then. She tried the door handle, found it stuck, put her shoulder to it and pushed. The door scraped open. The smell hit her first, sour and sick, the stench of unwashed bodies and something worse underneath. Infection. She'd smelled it before when her neighbor back home had cut his hand on a rusty nail and refused to see a doctor until it was almost too late. Her eyes adjusted to the dim interior. The main room was small. A fireplace, a table, 2 chairs, a cot against the far wall. And on the cot, a man. He was barely recognizable as human in the gloom. His hair was long and matted, his beard wild. A blanket covered most of his body, but his left arm lay outside it, wrapped in what might have once been bandages, but now looked like rags soaked in something dark. "I said get out!" The voice was weaker than the words, scraped raw. "This is private property." Mara set down her carpet bag and moved closer. The man, Turner, she assumed, turned his head to look at her, and she saw his face properly for the first time. Gaunt, fever-bright eyes, skin the color of old paper. This wasn't a man dying slowly. This was a man days, maybe hours from the end. "You need a doctor," she said. He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Brilliant observation. You want to run to town and fetch one? Be sure to mention it's for Caleb Turner. See how fast they come running." "What happened to your arm?" "Horse threw me 3 weeks back, landed on a broken post, thought I could handle it myself." Closed his eyes, exhausted by the conversation. "Turns out I was wrong about a lot of things." Mara knelt beside the cot and reached for the bandages. "Don't!" Caleb tried to pull away, but the movement cost him. He gasped, his face twisting in pain. She unwrapped the cloth carefully, steeling herself for what she'd find. The wound was worse than she'd expected. The flesh around it was swollen, discolored, radiating heat. Red streaks ran up his forearm like veins of poison. She'd seen enough farm injuries to know what this meant. "This needs to be cleaned," she said, "properly, and you need fresh bandages, water, food. I need to be left alone to die in peace." Caleb's voice was bitter. "You some kind of missionary? Come to save my soul before I go?" "I don't care about your soul." Mara stood and looked around the room, taking inventory. "Where's your well?" "Out back, but the bucket's got a hole in it." "Then I'll patch it. Where do you keep clean cloth?" "There isn't any." "Whiskey? Any alcohol?" He gestured weakly toward a shelf where a nearly empty bottle stood among dust and debris. "Help yourself. Might as well finish it. I'm past the point where it helps." Mara grabbed the bottle and checked the level. Maybe a quarter left. Not enough, but it was a start. She turned back to Caleb. "I'm going to help you whether you want it or not. You can cooperate and make it easier, or you can fight me and make it harder. Either way, I'm not leaving you like this." "Who the hell are you?" Caleb stared at her, confusion cutting through the fever haze. "Nobody," Mara said. "Just someone with nowhere else to go." She spent the next hour in a blur of activity. Found the well, discovered he was right about the bucket, tied her handkerchief over the hole as a temporary fix. Drew water anyway, spilling half of it on the way back. Found a pot, set it to boil in the fireplace that still had embers glowing. Tore strips from her second-best petticoat since there was no other clean cloth. Caleb drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling things she couldn't quite catch. When the water was hot enough, she brought it to the cot with the whiskey and the cloth strips. "This is going to hurt," she told him. His eyes opened, focused on her with unexpected clarity. "Do it." She poured the whiskey directly over the wound. Caleb's body went rigid, his teeth clenching so hard she heard them grind. A sound escaped him, animal and raw, but he didn't pull away. She worked quickly, cleaning the wound with the hot water and boiled cloth, removing the dead tissue as gently as she could. It was worse up close. She could see the infection spreading, see how deep it went. This might not be enough. Probably wasn't enough. But it was all she had. When she finished bandaging the arm with clean strips, Caleb had passed out again. His breathing shallow but steady. Mara sat back on her heels, her own hand shaking now that it was done. The room smelled like whiskey and sickness, and the reality of what she'd just committed to was starting to settle over her like a weight. She was in a dying ranch with a dying man, no money, no prospects, and no idea what came next. But she wasn't on that platform anymore. wasn't standing in Thomas Garrett's judgment, wasn't small and dismissed and worthless. She was here, doing something that mattered, even if it was just keeping one stubborn man alive through one more night. Mara stood and surveyed the room properly for the first time. It was a disaster. Dirty dishes, scattered belongings, the accumulated debris of someone who'd stopped caring weeks ago. The fireplace was full of ash. The floor was gritty under her feet. The whole place had the neglected feel of hope running out. Well, she knew how to clean. That at least was something she could do. She found a broom in the corner, missing half its bristles, but functional enough. Started sweeping, working around Caleb's cot, pushing the worst of the dirt toward the door. The physical activity felt good, purposeful. Each stroke of the broom was a small act of defiance against the chaos. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of orange and red. Through the open door, Mara could see the land stretching out endlessly, indifferent to human struggle. It was beautiful in a harsh way, like everything else in this place. She worked until the light failed, then lit the oil lamp she found on the table. The flame was small but steady, pushing back the darkness. Caleb was still unconscious, his breathing rough but regular. She checked his bandages, felt his forehead, still burning with fever. She made herself some coffee from the supplies she found in the kitchen, if you could call the small cooking area a kitchen. The coffee was old and bitter, but it was warm. She sat at the table, drinking it slowly, letting the exhaustion catch up with her. Her whole body ached. Her feet were blistered from the walk. Her hands were raw from cleaning. Her dress was stained with sweat, and worse. But underneath the physical discomfort was something else. A strange, tentative feeling she almost didn't recognize. Purpose. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she had a reason to wake up tomorrow that had nothing to do with meeting someone else's expectations or trying to become acceptable enough to be chosen. She had work to do, real work, work that mattered. It wasn't much. It probably wouldn't last. Caleb might die despite her efforts. The ranch might be too far gone to save. She might wake up tomorrow and realize this was just another kind of mistake. But tonight, in this small circle of lamplight, with the sound of labored breathing reminding her that she'd made a difference in at least one person's chance of survival, Mara Collins felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The first night was the longest. Caleb thrashed in his sleep, muttering words Mara couldn't make out, his good arm flailing against invisible threats. Twice she had to grab him to keep him from rolling off the narrow cot. His skin burned under her hands, the fever raging through him like wildfire. She stayed close, checking his bandages every hour, wiping his face with cool water when the tremors got bad. The lamp oil ran out around midnight, leaving her in darkness broken only by the dying embers in the fireplace. She fed the fire with wood she found stacked outside, grateful that at least he'd managed that much before he'd gotten too sick to function. By dawn, she was exhausted, but Caleb was still breathing. That felt like a victory, however small. The morning light revealed just how much work waited for her. The main room alone would take days to properly clean. She tackled it methodically, starting with the dishes piled in the wash basin. The pump at the sink sputtered and coughed, but eventually produced water that ran rust-colored for a full minute before clearing. Caleb woke mid-morning, his eyes unfocused and confused. "You're still here," he said, his voice rough as gravel. "Where else would I be? Town. Train station. Anywhere but this mess." He tried to sit up, made it about 6 inches before falling back with a grunt of pain. "You should go while you can still walk. This place has a way of trapping people." Mara wrung out the dish rag and hung it to dry. "I need to change your bandages again. The infection needs constant attention or it'll spread." "It's already spreading." Caleb's voice was flat, matter of fact. "I can feel it. Another day, maybe 2, and I'll be too far gone for bandages to matter. Then we'll make sure those 2 days count for something." She brought the supplies to his bedside and began unwrapping the arm. The wound looked marginally better. At least it wasn't actively seeping anymore, but the red streaks had darkened, reaching toward his elbow now. She cleaned it again with the hot water and the last of the whiskey, working as gently as she could while Caleb stared at the ceiling and breathed through his teeth. "Why are you doing this?" he asked when she finished wrapping fresh bandages. "I told you, I have nowhere else to go." That's not a reason to play nursemaid to a stranger, especially not one who's probably dead weight anyway. Mara sat back and looked at him directly. "You want the truth? I got off a train yesterday to marry a man who took one look at me and rode away. Left me standing there like I was something he'd ordered by mistake and wanted to return. I could have gone to the boarding house, spent what little I have on a room, while people whisper about the fat girl who came all this way for nothing. Or I could come here and be useful. So that's what I'm doing, being useful. Caleb studied her face, something shifting in his fever-bright eyes. The man's an idiot. The man's a coward. There's a difference. Fair enough. He closed his eyes again, but the corner of his mouth twitched. Water? She brought him the tin cup, helped him drink. His hands shook badly enough that most of it spilled down his chin, but he managed a few swallows. There's food in the pantry, he said after. Not much, but enough for a few days if you're careful. Flour, beans, some coffee. Help yourself. I found it already, made breakfast earlier. She'd eaten standing up, too wired to sit, chewing mechanically on the hardtack and dried beef she'd found. Not good, but fuel. When did you last eat something? Don't remember. 3 days? 4? He waved his good hand vaguely. Doesn't matter. Can't keep anything down anyway. You need to try. Your body can't fight the infection on an empty stomach. You sound like someone's mother. I sound like someone who's watched people die from being too stubborn to take care of themselves. Mara stood and went to the kitchen area, such as it was. I'll make soup, something light. You'll eat it even if I have to force it down your throat. She heard him laugh, weak but genuine. You're a hard woman, you know that? I'm practical. There's a difference. The soup was simple, beans and a little dried meat boiled until both were soft enough to swallow without chewing. She added salt and some wild onions she'd found growing near the well. It wasn't good, but it was hot, and it was food. Caleb managed 4 spoonfuls before pushing it away. Enough. That's barely anything. It's more than I've had in a week. Give me an hour, and I'll try again. Mara didn't argue. Small victories. That's all she could expect right now. She spent the afternoon exploring the property, taking stock of what she had to work with. The barn was in worse shape than she'd thought. Half the roof had caved in, and the stalls were rotting. But there were tools scattered around, some still usable. A hammer with a loose head, a saw with a bent blade, an axe that needed sharpening. She gathered them into a pile near the house, already thinking about repairs she could make. The chicken coop was empty, the fence around it broken down. The vegetable garden had gone to weeds and seed. The well was solid, at least, stone-lined and deep, the water cold and clear when she drew it up. That was something. Water meant survival. She found herself thinking about the ranch not as it was, but as it could be. The bones were good. The land was harsh, but workable. With time and effort, this place could produce something. Not wealth, but living. That seemed like enough. When she came back inside, Caleb was awake again, watching the door. Thought you might have run off, he said. Where would I run to? Mara set down the tools she'd collected. I was looking at the barn. It needs work, but it's not hopeless. Everything here is hopeless. But his voice lacked conviction. Self-pity doesn't suit you. She brought him more water, checked his forehead. Still hot, but maybe not quite as burning as before. Or maybe she was imagining improvement because she needed to believe it was possible. Tell me about this place. How long have you been here? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. 3 years. Bought it with money I saved working cattle drives. Thought I could make something of it. Build a life. What happened? Life happened. Drought the first year. Lost most of my herd. Borrowed money to buy more cattle, then lost half of those to disease. Couldn't pay back what I owed. People in town started talking, said I was bad luck, bad business. Eventually, they just stopped dealing with me altogether. He shifted on the cot, his jaw tight. Then the accident with the horse. Final insult, I guess. Is that why no one came to check on you? Because of bad blood? Bad blood would be generous. They'd probably celebrate if I died out here. One less failure cluttering up the landscape. Mara absorbed this, understanding more than he'd said. She knew what it was like to be written off, to have people decide your worth before you'd even opened your mouth. Different reasons, same result. Well, she said finally, you're not dead yet, and as long as you're breathing, things can change. You actually believe that? I have to believe something. She met his eyes. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this? The days began to blur together, each one measured in small tasks and smaller victories. Mara fell into a rhythm, wake before dawn, check Caleb's bandages, make whatever food she could manage from the dwindling supplies, clean something, repair something, collapse into sleep on the floor beside his cot, too exhausted to dream. Caleb's fever broke on the 4th day. Not completely, he still burned hot in the evenings, but the delirious thrashing stopped. He could hold conversations now without drifting mid-sentence, could keep down more than a few bites of food. The arm was still bad, still infected, but the red streaks had stopped advancing. The wound was fighting back. "You should be dead," Mara told him one morning while changing the bandages. The words came out blunter than she'd intended. "I know." Caleb watched her work, his face less gaunt now, more present. "I was ready for it, honestly. Felt like the natural conclusion to everything that's happened. Then you showed up and decided I wasn't allowed to quit." "Someone needed to." She tied off the fresh bandage, checking that it was snug but not cutting off circulation. "You're too young to give up." "I'm 32, that's not young. It's not old either. You've got plenty of years left to be bitter and defeated if you really want to commit to it. But maybe try staying alive first." He laughed at that, a real laugh that caught them both by surprise. "You're strange, you know that? Most women would have run screaming from this place." "Most women would have better options." Mara started gathering up the soiled bandages. "I'm working with what I've got." "Which is?" "Stubbornness, apparently, and a high tolerance for disaster. Useful qualities out here." She glanced at him. "You saying I can stay?" "I'm saying I'm in no position to throw you out. You've probably saved my life. Least I can do is not be a bastard about it." It wasn't exactly a warm welcome, but it was acknowledgement. That counted for something. By the end of the first week, Caleb could sit up without help. By the end of the second, he could stand for short periods, leaning heavily on the table for support. The infection was retreating, slowly but visibly. His arm would never be the same, the muscle damage was too severe, the scarring too deep, but he'd keep it. That was more than either of them had expected. As Caleb got stronger, he started talking more. Not about anything important at first, just observations, complaints about being cooped up inside, questions about what Mara had been doing around the property. But gradually, in the quiet hours between sunset and sleep, he told her more. About growing up in Montana, the youngest of 5 brothers. About leaving home at 16 because there wasn't enough land to divide 5 ways. About the years of hard work that had taught him everything except how to ask for help when he needed it. "I thought I had it figured out," he said one evening, staring into the fire. "Thought if I just worked hard enough, kept my head down, did everything right, it would work out. Turns out there's a lot more to success than effort." "Like what?" "Luck, timing, being the kind of person other people want to help instead of avoid." He prodded the fire with a stick, sending up sparks. "I'm not that person. Never have been." Mara was quiet for a moment. "What makes someone that person?" "Hell if I know. Being charming, knowing how to smile and make friends. I'm not good at any of that. I'm good at work. That's all I've ever been good at. Work matters." "Not as much as you'd think." He set the stick aside. "What about you? What brought you all the way to Arizona to marry a stranger?" It was the question she'd been avoiding thinking about, let alone answering. But they'd been living in each other's pockets for 2 weeks now. He'd earned some honesty. "I wanted out," she said simply. "Out of my mother's house, out of my sister's shadow, out of the entire little world where everyone knew me as the Collins girl who'd never amount to anything. I thought if I went far enough away, I could be someone different, someone who mattered." "And the man who sent for you? What was his story?" "I don't know. I thought I did, but I never really knew him. Just words on paper that sounded nice." She pulled her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. "Turns out paper lies as easy as people do." "He really just left you at the station?" "Didn't even wait to see if I had somewhere to go. Just rode off like I was a problem that would solve itself if he ignored it long enough." Caleb shook his head. "You're better off without him." "I know. Doesn't mean it didn't hurt." "No," he agreed quietly. "I suppose it wouldn't." They sat in companionable silence after that, the fire crackling between them, the night pressing close against the windows. Outside, a coyote howled somewhere in the distance, lonely and defiant. Mara had started rationing the food carefully, but by the 3rd week, supplies were running critically low. The flour was nearly gone, the beans down to a handful, the coffee just bitter grounds. She'd been avoiding the reality of it, but there was no getting around it anymore. She needed to go into town. The prospect filled her with dread. Walking back into that place, facing the stares and whispers, maybe even seeing Thomas Garrett again, all of it made her stomach clench. But the alternative was starving, and that wasn't acceptable. "I need to make a supply run," she told Caleb one morning. He was sitting at the table now, able to stay upright for hours at a time. His color had returned, though he was still gaunt, still weak. Do you have any credit in town? Anywhere that might extend a line until the ranch produces something? Caleb's expression went dark. No, I told you, they cut me off months ago. You go into any store in that town and mention my name, they'll throw you out before you finish asking. Then what do I do? You have any money of your own? A few dollars, not enough for what we need. He rubbed his face with his good hand, thinking. There's a man named Dutch Harrison who runs the general store. He's the only one who might deal straight with you, but that's only if you don't mention me. Tell him you're just passing through, need supplies to get to the next town. Pay cash, keep it simple. And when the money runs out, then we figure something else out. He looked at her steadily. Or you leave before it comes to that. I wouldn't blame you. I'm not leaving. The words came out harder than she'd intended. We're past that. Are we? Yes. She held his gaze. We are. The walk to town took most of the morning. Mara wore her least-stained dress, tried to make herself presentable, but she knew how she looked. Tired, worn, like exactly what she was. A woman living rough on a failing ranch with a man she barely knew. The town would make assumptions. Let them. The main street was busier than it had been the day she'd arrived. Saturday, she realized. Market day. Wagons lined the street, people moving between shops and stalls. She kept her head up and walked directly to the general store, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. The interior was dim and crowded with merchandise. A man stood behind the counter, 50 or so, with a shrewd face and careful eyes. Dutch Harrison, presumably. Help you? He asked, his tone neutral. I need supplies. Flour, beans, coffee, bacon if you have it, sugar, salt, bandages, and carbolic if you stock it. He studied her for a moment. You new around here? Passing through, staying out at... She caught herself just in time. Staying with family north of town. They needed some things. North of town. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. He knew. Of course he knew. Small town, one stranger, everyone would know exactly where she was staying. That'll be $4 even. It was more than fair, suspiciously fair, actually. Mara counted out the money, watching his face for signs of pity or judgment. She found neither. Appreciate your business, he said, wrapping the supplies in brown paper. You need help getting that anywhere? I can manage. I'm sure you can. He slid the packages across the counter. But if you need anything else, you know where to find me. She was almost to the door when a woman's voice stopped her cold. Well, if it isn't the mail-order bride. Mara turned. A woman stood near the fabric displays, pretty in that sharp-featured way, her dress expensive, her smile cruel. Behind her, two other women watched with barely concealed interest. Excuse me? Mara kept her voice level. Thomas Garrett's mail-order bride, the one who showed up and got sent packing. You're still here? The woman's eyes traveled over Mara's body with open disdain. I thought you'd have run home by now. Surely you realized by now that no one here wants you. The store had gone quiet. Everyone was watching now, waiting to see how this would play out. Mara felt the old familiar heat rising in her chest. Shame mixed with anger, the toxic combination that had defined too much of her life. She could leave, should leave, walk out and let them have their moment of superiority. But something in her refused. You're right, she said clearly. Thomas Garrett didn't want me. Took one look and decided I wasn't good enough. That was the best thing that could have happened, actually. Saved me from wasting my time on a man with no spine and less character. The woman's smile faltered. You have some nerve. I have a lot of nerve. I also have work to do. So if you're finished amusing yourself at my expense, I'll be going. She picked up her packages and walked out, her heart hammering but her steps steady. Behind her, she heard the sharp buzz of conversation starting up again, but she didn't look back. The confrontation left her shaking. She made it to the edge of town before she had to stop and sit on a rock, her packages beside her, her hands trembling. Not because of what the woman had said, she'd heard worse, but because she'd stood up, because she'd refused to be small and silent and ashamed. It felt dangerous. It felt right. When she got back to the ranch, Caleb was standing in the yard, leaning against the porch railing for support. He'd made it outside, which was progress, but he looked exhausted from the effort. You were gone a long time, he said. Started to worry. Had a run-in with some charming locals. She climbed the steps and set down the supplies. They wanted to make sure I knew I wasn't welcome. What did you say? That they could think whatever they wanted. I had better things to do than care. Caleb's mouth quirked. How'd that go over? About as well as you'd expect. She started unpacking the supplies, checking what Dutch had given her. Everything was there, good quality. But I got what we needed. That's what matters. You know they'll talk now? Make it worse than it already is. Let them talk. They were already talking anyway. She looked at him. Does it bother you that I'm here? That people will assume things? People have been assuming things about me for years. What's one more rumor? He pushed off from the railing, wincing. Besides, you saved my life. That trumps town gossip any day. It wasn't a declaration of anything, but it was enough. They understood each other, at least on this. That night, Mara made a proper meal with the new supplies, beans cooked with bacon, fresh bread from the flour, coffee that didn't taste like mud. Caleb ate 2 full plates, the first time she'd seen him finish a meal since she'd arrived. This is good, he said, mopping up the last of the beans with bread. Really good. It's basic. It's better than anything I've managed in months. He set down his plate and looked at her across the table. I need to say something, and I'm not great at this kind of thing, so bear with me. You didn't have to stay. You didn't have to help. You could have walked away a dozen times, and no one would have blamed you, but you didn't. And I don't know how to repay that. You don't have to repay anything. Yes, I do. This is your home now if you want it. Not as a guest, not as hired help. As a partner. Half of everything here is yours. For whatever that's worth. Mara stared at him, caught completely off guard. Caleb, you don't have to... I'm not offering out of obligation. I'm offering because it's right. You've put as much work into this place as I have. More, actually, since I've been useless for weeks. If we're going to make this work, make the ranch work, we do it together or not at all. She thought about what he was offering. Not marriage, not romance, but something that might matter more. Partnership, respect, a share in something real. Together, she said finally. But I'm keeping track of expenses. When the ranch starts producing again, I want to square on what we each put in. Deal. He held out his good hand. She shook it, his grip firm despite the weakness still in his limbs. It wasn't love. It wasn't what she'd come to Arizona looking for. But it was honest, and it was hers, and that was something new. The partnership changed things in ways Mara hadn't anticipated. Having a stake in the ranch meant every choice mattered more. Every repair or improvement was an investment in her own future, not just charity work for a dying man. She attacked the work with new energy, and Caleb, growing stronger by the day, joined her when he could. They started with the chicken coop. Caleb supervised while Mara hauled lumber salvaged from the collapsed section of barn, and together they rebuilt the fence and patched the worst of the holes in the structure itself. It took 3 days of hard work, but when they finished, it looked almost respectable. Now we just need chickens, Caleb said, surveying their handiwork. One problem at a time. Mara wiped sweat from her forehead. First, we need money for chickens, which means we need to figure out what this place can produce that people will actually buy. They were still living off the supplies from town, stretching everything as far as it would go, but the money was gone. Mara had spent her last dollar on the carbolic for Caleb's arm. They had maybe 2 weeks before they'd be down to nothing. The next morning, Caleb suggested they ride out to check the property boundaries, see what they were actually working with. His mare had survived his neglect in better shape than he had, and there was an old gelding in the barn that was sound enough for riding, if not much else. Mara had ridden before, back home, but never regularly and never well. The gelding seemed to sense this and took advantage, testing her at every opportunity. By the time they'd covered half the property, her thighs ached and her hands were sore from gripping the reins too tight. You're fighting him, Caleb said, watching her struggle. Relax, let him know you're in charge without strangling him. Easy for you to say. Your horse actually likes you. She tolerates me. There's a difference. He demonstrated, his seat easy despite the weakness still in his injured arm. You're too tense. Breathe. Mara tried to relax, tried to find the rhythm he made look effortless. It didn't come naturally, but after another hour of riding, she started to get the feel of it. Not good, but functional. The property was bigger than she'd realized, stretching out across scrubland and rocky outcrops. There was a creek bed that was dry now, but showed signs of running water during wetter seasons. A stand of cottonwood trees marked what might have been a natural spring at one point. The land was harsh, but it had potential. "How much of this is actually yours?" Mara asked. "About 200 acres, give or take. Most of it's only good for grazing, and even then you can't run many head without stripping it bare." Caleb pulled his mare to a stop on a rise overlooking the ranch buildings. From here, you could see the whole spread, small and struggling, but theirs. "I had 30 head of cattle when I started, down to 8 now. Not enough to make a living, but enough to rebuild if we're smart about it." "Where are they?" "South pasture, probably. They're range cattle, mostly take care of themselves. We should check on them while we're out here." They found the cattle scattered across a stretch of grassland that looked only marginally more productive than the rest of the property. 8 animals, like Caleb had said, skinny, tough-looking creatures that eyed them with suspicion. "Not much to look at," Caleb admitted, "but they're survivors. That counts for something in country like this." Mara studied them, thinking. "Could we sell them? Get money to buy supplies, rebuild properly?" "We could, but then we'd have nothing to build with. These cattle are our seed stock. Sell them now, and we're starting from zero." He shifted in the saddle, his expression troubled. "We need time more than anything. Time for me to heal completely, time for the ranch to produce something, time to prove to the bank that we're worth extending credit to. The bank won't give you credit. You said so yourself." "They won't give me credit, but they might give us credit. 2 people working together, showing actual progress, that's different from 1 man failing alone." "You think they'd see it that way?" "I think it's worth trying." He turned his mare back toward the ranch. "But not yet. We need to show them something first, proof that we're serious." They rode back in silence, both of them calculating, both of them aware of how thin their margins were. One bad break, one unexpected expense, and the whole fragile structure they were building would collapse. That night, Mara lay awake on her bedroll near the fireplace, staring at the ceiling. Caleb had given her his bed a week ago, insisting he could sleep on the cot now that he was stronger, but she'd refused. The bed was his. She was fine on the floor. They'd argued about it for 10 minutes before settling on both of them being stubborn, him on the cot, her on the floor. She could hear him breathing across the room, steady and deep. He slept better now, without the fever dreams and thrashing. That was good. They both needed rest for what was coming. The problem gnawed at her. They needed money, but they had nothing to sell except cattle they couldn't afford to part with. They needed credit, but no one would extend it. They needed time, but time meant depleting resources they didn't have. She must have eventually slept, because she woke to Caleb shaking her shoulder, his face tight with worry. "Someone's coming," he said quietly. 2 riders, maybe 3, from town. Mara scrambled up, her heart hammering. Visitors were never good news. She moved to the window and peered out. 3 men on horseback, approaching at an easy pace. Not rushing, not threatening, but deliberate. The lead rider was familiar. She'd seen him in town, though she didn't know his name. "You recognize them?" she asked. "The one in front is Robert Lansing, runs the bank. The other 2 are his hired men." Caleb's voice was carefully neutral, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "This isn't social." They waited on the porch, presenting a united front. Lansing pulled up his horse 20 feet away, his eyes taking in the cleaned yard, the repaired chicken coop, the general signs of recent work. "Turner," he said by way of greeting. His gaze shifted to Mara. Mr. Lansing?" Caleb kept his good hand relaxed at his side, but Mara noticed his injured arm was tucked close to his body, protected. "What brings you out here?" "Business, the unpleasant kind." Lansing shifted in his saddle. "You owe the bank $300, Turner. Payment was due 2 months ago. I've been patient, given your circumstances, but patience has limits." "I'm aware of what I owe. Are you aware that I can foreclose on this property? Take the land, the buildings, whatever cattle you've got left?" "I'm aware." Caleb's voice stayed level. "I'm also aware that foreclosing gets you nothing. This place isn't worth $300 in its current state. You'd lose money trying to sell it." "Maybe, but it would set an example. Show other borrowers that the bank doesn't tolerate deadbeats." Mara felt anger spike hot in her chest. She stepped forward before she could think better of it. "He's not a deadbeat," she said clearly. "He had a serious injury that nearly killed him. He's recovering now, and we're working to make this place productive again. If you'd give us time—" Lansing's attention fixed on her, his expression shifting to something between surprise and disdain. And who are you exactly? Mara Collins. I'm Mr. Turner's partner. Partner. He let the word hang there, loaded with implication. I see. And how long have you been partnering with Mr. Turner? Long enough to know this ranch is worth saving. She refused to back down, refused to acknowledge the insinuation. We just need time to prove it. Time costs money, Miss Collins. Money Mr. Turner doesn't have. Then extend the loan. Give us 6 months to show you this place can produce. If we can't make payments by then, you can have it all. Lansing studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he laughed, sharp and humorless. 6 months? And what exactly are you going to produce in 6 months? Miracles? Cattle, crops if the weather holds, whatever it takes. Mara felt Caleb's hand on her elbow, a gentle warning, but she ignored it. We're not asking for charity. We're asking for a fair chance. Fair chances are for people who've earned them. Lansing gathered his reins. You've got until the end of next month to make a payment. $50 minimum, or I start foreclosure proceedings. That's more fairness than Turner deserves. He wheeled his horse around and rode off, his men following. Mara watched them go, her hands shaking with suppressed fury. $50, she said when they were out of earshot. Where are we supposed to get $50 in a month? We're not. Caleb's voice was flat, defeated in a way she hadn't heard since those first fevered days. That's the point. He's giving us just enough rope to hang ourselves, then he'll take the property and sell it to someone with actual money. Probably already has a buyer lined up. So we give up? Let him win? I don't see another option, Mara. We can't make $50 appear out of thin air. She turned on him, suddenly furious. You're the one who offered me a partnership. You're the one who said we could make this work together. Was that all talk? Because if it was, tell me now, and I'll walk away. But if you meant it, then we fight. Caleb stared at her, something shifting in his eyes. How? I don't know yet, but we figure it out. We don't just surrender because some banker shows up and threatens us. She jabbed a finger toward the departing riders. That man thinks we're nothing, thinks we'll fold. Let's prove him wrong. For a long moment, Caleb said nothing. Then slowly, he nodded. All right, we fight, but we need a plan. They spent the afternoon taking inventory of everything they had. The cattle were worth maybe $100 total if they could find a buyer, but selling them meant giving up their only real asset. The tools and equipment were old and mostly broken. The land itself had value, but only if they could hold on to it long enough to develop it. What about horses? Mara asked. Could we breed them? Sell foals? Takes too long, and we'd need a decent stud, which we don't have. Chickens? Same problem. Need initial stock, need time for them to lay and hatch. They were going in circles, chasing solutions that needed more time or more money than they had. Mara felt frustration building, the same helpless feeling she'd had standing on that train platform watching Thomas Garrett ride away. There has to be something, she said. Something people need that we can provide. Caleb was quiet, thinking. Then, water. What? Water. The spring on the north property line. It's reliable even in dry years. Ranchers drive cattle through here sometimes, looking for water. We could charge for access. Would people pay? If they're desperate enough. And in summer, with the creek beds dry, they get desperate. He warmed to the idea, his voice gaining energy. It's not much, but it's something. A few dollars here and there could add up. It wasn't enough, Mara knew. A few dollars from occasional cattle drives wouldn't get them to 50, but it was a start, a foundation to build on. What else? She pressed. I could hire out for work, day labor, ranch hand, whatever people need. Your arm is getting better every day. I can swing an axe, mend fence. I'm not useless. I wasn't saying you were. Mara paused, another idea forming. What about me? Could I find work in town? Caleb's expression darkened. After the way they treated you? You really want to go back there? I don't want to, but if it means saving this place, I'll do it. Doing what? Who's going to hire you? The question wasn't meant cruelly, but it landed that way. Mara felt the old familiar sting, the reminder that her options were limited, that her body made her unemployable for most respectable work. I can clean, she said stiffly. I can cook. I can do laundry. Someone in that town needs help and I need money. It's simple math. It's not simple. Caleb's voice was harder now. You go into town looking for work, and people will talk. They'll say things. Make assumptions. They're already making assumptions. At least this way we get paid for it. They stared at each other across the table, the tension thick between them. Finally, Caleb looked away. "You're right," he said quietly. "Do what you need to do. We both will." The next morning, Mara rode into town alone. The gelding behaved better this time, perhaps sensing her grim determination. She tied him outside the general store and went in, finding Dutch Harrison restocking shelves. "Miss Collins," he said, his tone neutral, "what can I do for you?" "I'm looking for work. Cleaning, cooking, laundry, anything you might know of." Dutch set down the canned goods he'd been organizing and looked at her directly. "You're serious?" "Completely." He was quiet for a moment, considering. "Mrs. Patterson might need help. She runs the boarding house, and her regular girl just left to get married. Can't promise she'll hire you, but she might listen." "Where's the boarding house?" 2 blocks east, blue building with white trim. Can't miss it." Mara thanked him and left, following his directions. The boarding house was easy to spot. Well-maintained, respectable. Exactly the kind of place that probably wouldn't want someone like her working there. She almost turned around, but thought of Lansing's ultimatum and forced herself up the steps. Mrs. Patterson answered the door herself, a woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled into a tight bun and eyes that missed nothing. "Help you?" she asked, her tone clipped. "I'm looking for work. Dutch Harrison said you might need help." "Did he now?" Mrs. Patterson looked Mara up and down, her assessment frank and thorough. "You have experience?" "Yes, ma'am. Cleaning, cooking, managing a household." "References?" Mara hesitated. She had no references. No proof of anything except her word. "No, ma'am, but I'm a hard worker, and I'll do whatever needs doing." "Where are you staying?" Here it came, the moment where everything would fall apart. Out at the Turner Ranch, Mrs. Patterson's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "I see. And Mr. Turner knows you're here looking for work?" "Yes, ma'am. We're partners. The ranch needs money, so I'm trying to help earn it." Partners. The word carried weight, judgment. That what they're calling it these days? Mara felt heat rise in her face, but she kept her voice steady. "That's what we are. Nothing more. Nothing less. But if you've already made up your mind about me, I won't waste any more of your time." She turned to leave, but Mrs. Patterson's voice stopped her. "I didn't say I'd made up my mind. I said I wanted to know the situation." The older woman crossed her arms. "Truth is, I do need help. My regular girl left without notice, and I've got 6 boarders who expect clean rooms and hot meals. You can work, you can keep your mouth shut about what you see and hear in this house. I'll pay you $2 a week. 7 days, 6 hours a day. That acceptable?" $2 a week. It wasn't much, but over a month it would be $8. Combined with whatever Caleb could earn, it might be enough. Or at least close enough to try. "Yes, ma'am? When do I start?" "Tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock sharp. Don't be late." Mara rode back to the ranch feeling something almost like hope. It wasn't the solution to everything, but it was progress. Real, tangible progress. Caleb was working on the barn roof when she got back, moving carefully but competently despite his weakened arm. He climbed down when he saw her approach. "How'd it go?" "I got a job. Boarding house, $2 a week." His face went through several expressions. Surprise, relief, then something darker. "Mrs. Patterson hired you, knowing you're staying here." "She knows. She doesn't care, or at least she's willing to look past it for help she needs. Or she's willing to let you work for her while she judges you every minute of every day." Caleb pulled off his work gloves. "That woman's got a tongue sharp enough to cut glass. You sure you want to deal with that?" "I'm sure I want $50 by the end of next month. If that means dealing with Mrs. Patterson's opinion, so be it." He studied her face, then nodded slowly. "All right, I'll see about finding work too. Maybe some of the ranches further out will hire me on. They might not know my reputation yet." The next 4 weeks blurred into exhaustion. Mara worked at the boarding house 6 hours every day, scrubbing floors and washing sheets and cooking meals for boarders who either ignored her completely or watched her with undisguised curiosity. Mrs. Patterson was as sharp-tongued as Caleb had warned, criticizing everything from how Mara folded linens to how she seasoned the stew, but she paid on time and didn't pry into her personal life beyond that first conversation. The real poison came from the boarders themselves, and the people she encountered in town. The whispers followed her everywhere. She'd catch fragments of conversations that cut off when she approached, see knowing looks exchanged behind her back. The story had evolved in the town's collective imagination. She wasn't just staying at Turner's ranch. She was living with him, sleeping with him, carrying on in a way that confirmed every low expectation anyone had ever had about people like them. One afternoon, she overheard two women talking outside the general store while she was picking up supplies for Mrs. Patterson. Shameless, that's what it is. Living out there with him, no marriage, no decency. What did you expect? Look at her. No decent man would have her, so she settles for Turner. They deserve each other, honestly. Mara walked past them with her head high, but their words burrowed under her skin like splinters. She'd known there would be judgment, but knowing didn't make it easier to bear. Caleb was having his own difficulties. He'd found work with a rancher named Morrison 2 valleys over, mending fence and doing general repairs. The work was hard, and his arm ached constantly, but he pushed through it. Morrison paid fair and didn't ask questions, which was all Caleb needed. But word traveled. By the 3rd week, when Caleb rode back to Morrison's ranch for another day of work, the man was waiting with an uncomfortable expression. "Turner, we need to talk." Caleb dismounted slowly. "Problem with my work?" "No, your work's fine. It's—" Morrison cleared his throat. "My wife heard some things in town about you and that woman you've got living with you. She's not comfortable with me employing someone in that kind of situation. Says it sets a bad example." "What situation is that exactly?" "You know what I mean. Living together without benefit of marriage. It's not, look, I don't care what you do on your own time, but my wife has strong opinions, and I have to live with her." Morrison pulled an envelope from his pocket. "I'm paying you for the days you worked, but I can't use you anymore. Sorry." Caleb took the money without a word and rode home, the anger building with every mile. It wasn't fair. None of this was fair. They were working themselves to exhaustion, doing everything right, and the town was still finding ways to punish them for existing outside the narrow bounds of respectability. When he got back to the ranch, Mara was already there, sitting on the porch steps with her face in her hands. She looked up when she heard his horse, and he saw she'd been crying. "What happened?" he asked, tying off his mare. "Mrs. Patterson let me go. Said some of her boarders complained about having someone like me in the house. She gave me what she owed me for this week, but that's it. No more work." Caleb sat down beside her, the weight of Morrison's rejection still fresh. "I just got let go too. Different reason, same result." They sat in silence, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. All that work, all that effort, and they were right back where they'd started. Worse, actually, because now the town had confirmed what it suspected and spread it far enough that no one else would hire them either. "How much did we make total?" Mara asked finally. "I got about $12. You?" "8, so 20 total. We need 50. "I know." More silence. The evening was cooling off, a slight breeze carrying the scent of sage and dust. In the distance, one of their cattle lowed, a lonely sound that matched Mara's mood exactly. "I'm sorry," Caleb said quietly. "This is my fault. My debts, my reputation. You shouldn't have to suffer for it. We're partners, remember? That means we share the suffering along with everything else." Mara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "But I'm tired, Caleb. Tired of fighting. Tired of people treating us like we're garbage. Part of me just wants to give up and let Lansing have this place." "Is that what you really want?" She thought about it honestly. "No, I want to prove them all wrong. I want to make this ranch work and show the whole damn town that we're worth something. But I don't know how to do that with $30 and 3 weeks left." "We could sell the cattle," Caleb suggested, though his voice made it clear how much the idea pained him. "Sell everything, pay Lansing, start over somewhere else." "And go where? Do what? This is all we have." "Then we make the most of it, however long it lasts." Mara turned to look at him, really look at him. His face was thinner than when she'd first found him, hardened by work and worry, but the fever brightness was gone from his eyes. He looked solid, real, like someone who'd fight beside her instead of abandoning her to save himself. "I'm not leaving," she said. "I don't care what the town thinks or what Lansing threatens. This is my home now, and I'm staying until they drag me out." Something shifted in Caleb's expression, relief mixed with something deeper. "Then we're staying together. Whatever happens." "Whatever happens," she agreed. They sat there as darkness fell. Two people who'd been written off by the world, refusing to disappear quietly. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't even hope exactly, but it was something to hold on to in the face of everything trying to pull them under. And for tonight, that would have to be enough. The decision came to Mara 3 days later while she was drawing water from the well. It arrived fully formed, like something that had been waiting beneath the surface all along, just needing the right moment to break through. She couldn't stay. The thought made her chest tight, made her hand shake on the rope, but she couldn't deny its logic. Every day she remained at the ranch, she made things worse for Caleb. The town's judgment wasn't going to fade, it would only calcify, harden into something permanent. As long as she was here, no one would hire him, no one would extend credit, no one would give them the chance they needed. But if she left, if she disappeared, the narrative would shift. Caleb could tell people she'd moved on, gone back east, whatever story worked. He could rebuild his reputation slowly, carefully. Maybe find work again. Maybe convince Lansing to extend the loan based on being alone, being respectable again. It was the smart choice, the practical one. It was also the choice that made her want to put her fist through something. She hauled the bucket up and carried it inside, where Caleb was attempting to fix a broken chair with limited success. His injured arm was getting stronger, but fine motor control still escaped him. He looked up when she entered, saw something in her face. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Just thinking." She set the bucket down too hard, water sloshing over the sides. "How much money do we have left?" "About $25. Why?" "That would get me to California. Maybe Utah if I'm careful." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Caleb set down the chair leg he'd been working on and stood slowly. "You're leaving?" "I'm thinking about it." "Why?" "Because every day I'm here makes your life harder. You know it's true. The town thinks we're—" She gestured helplessly. "They've decided what we are, and nothing we say will change that. But if I go, you can repair your reputation. Find work. Save this place." "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." Caleb's voice was flat, hard. "You think I care what those people think?" "You should care. Your survival depends on them." "My survival depends on not being alone when the next disaster hits." "Which it will, because that's how this works." He moved toward her, his expression intense. "You saved my life, Mara. You worked yourself half to death trying to make this place viable. You think I'm just going to let you walk away because some narrow-minded idiots can't handle the idea of two people helping each other? It's not about what you want. It's about what's smart. Smart would have been letting me die in that bed. Smart would have been taking your last few dollars and getting on a train to anywhere else. You didn't do smart then, so don't start now." Mara felt tears burning behind her eyes and hated herself for it. "I'm trying to help you." "Then stay. Fight with me. We'll figure something out." "How?" "We've got 3 weeks and $25. There's no figuring out of that." "So we sell the cattle, pay Lansing enough to buy more time. And then what?" "We'd have nothing to build with, nothing to invest in. We'd be right back here in 6 months, except worse off." She shook her head. "I've thought this through, Caleb. If I leave, you at least have a chance." "I don't want a chance without you here." The words came out raw, surprising them both. Caleb looked away, his jaw working. "I was dead before you showed up. Not just dying, dead in every way that mattered. You gave me a reason to keep breathing, keep trying. You think I'm going to just let that go?" "You might have to." "No." He turned back to her, and the look on his face made her breath catch. "I won't. I can't. So if you're leaving, you better do it while I'm asleep, because I'm not going to stand here and watch you walk away." The argument should have ended there, but it didn't. It circled back on itself over the next 2 days. The same points made and remade, neither of them willing to budge. Caleb insisted she stay. Mara insisted leaving was the only logical choice. They worked in tense silence, ate meals without speaking, went to bed angry, and woke up angrier. On the 3rd day, Mara started packing. She didn't have much. The clothes she'd arrived in, a few items she'd acquired since, her mother's old Bible that she kept more for sentiment than faith. It all fit in her carpet bag with room to spare. She did it quietly, while Caleb was outside checking on the cattle, and when she finished, she sat on the floor and tried to figure out how she was going to actually leave, just walk away. That's all it took. Put one foot in front of the other and don't look back. She'd done it before. Left her mother's house with barely a goodbye. Gotten on that train to Arizona full of stupid hope and desperate dreams. She could do it again. She'd survived rejection before. She'd survived this too. The sound of hoofbeats outside pulled her from her thoughts. Multiple horses, approaching fast. Mara moved to the window and felt her stomach drop. 5 riders, led by Thomas Garrett. She was outside before she fully thought it through, moving to intercept them before they reached the house. Caleb appeared from the barn, his expression dark when he saw who'd come calling. Thomas pulled up his horse, looking more uncomfortable than aggressive. The 4 men with him looked like ranch hands, hired muscle, in case things went bad. One of them she recognized from town, a man named Ricketts, who'd made a lewd comment the last time she'd been at the general store. "Miss Collins?" Thomas said, nodding to her like they were acquaintances meeting by chance. "I need to speak with you." "We have nothing to talk about." Mara kept her voice steady despite the anger churning in her gut. "I think we do. I've been hearing things in town, disturbing things about your situation out here." "My situation is none of your concern. I feel responsible." Thomas dismounted, his movements careful, calculated to appear non-threatening. "I brought you here, after all. Left you in a difficult position. I'd like to make amends." "By showing up with 4 men? That's how you make amends?" "They're here for your protection." Thomas glanced at Caleb, and something cold flickered in his expression. "I'm not sure you understand the position you're in, Miss Collins. Living out here with a man, unmarried, no proper chaperone. People are talking. Your reputation is being destroyed." "My reputation?" Mara laughed, the sound sharp. "You destroyed that the moment you rode away from the train station. Don't pretend you care about it now. I'm offering you a way out." Thomas pulled an envelope from his jacket. "I have a ticket here. Train leaves tomorrow, goes back east. I'll pay your passage, give you enough money to get settled somewhere new. You can start over, away from all this." Caleb moved to stand beside Mara, his presence solid and steady. "She's not going anywhere." "I wasn't talking to you, Turner." Thomas's voice hardened. "Everyone knows your situation. You're weeks from losing this place. You've got nothing to offer her except poverty and scandal. I'm giving her a chance to escape before it all comes down." "How generous!" Mara felt Caleb tense beside her and put a hand on his arm, a silent message to let her handle this. "Let me be clear, Mr. Garrett. You don't get to decide what I need or where I go. You gave up that right when you left me stranded. I chose to stay here. I chose this place, this life, this partnership. No one forced me." "You're being foolish. Throwing away any chance at a decent future for what? A dying ranch and a man who can't even pay his debts? That's enough." Caleb's voice was quiet but dangerous. "You've said your piece. Now get off my property." One of the ranch hands shifted in his saddle, his hand moving toward his belt. Ricketts, the one from town, smiled unpleasantly. "Maybe the lady needs convincing. Sometimes women don't know what's good for them." "You want to try convincing her?" Caleb's stance shifted, his weight balanced despite the weakness in his left arm. "Step down off that horse and we'll see how it goes." The tension ratcheted up instantly. Mara felt it crackling in the air, saw the way the men were positioning themselves. This could go bad quickly. "Stop." She stepped forward, putting herself between Caleb and the riders. "All of you, just stop. Thomas, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested. I'm staying here. That's my choice. Now please leave." Thomas studied her for a long moment, his expression shifting through several emotions she couldn't quite read. Finally, he tucked the envelope back in his jacket. "You're making a mistake," he said. "When this falls apart, and it will, don't expect sympathy from anyone. You had a chance to do the right thing." "I am doing the right thing. For me." He mounted his horse without another word, but Ricketts wasn't done. "Shame to waste yourself on damaged goods," he said, looking pointedly at Caleb. "But I suppose beggars can't be choosers, can they?" Mara felt Caleb surge forward and grabbed his arm hard, her fingers digging in. "Don't. They're trying to provoke you. Don't give them the satisfaction." For a horrible moment, she thought he wouldn't listen. His whole body was coiled tight, ready to launch himself at Ricketts, despite the odds, despite the consequences. Then something in him loosened, and he stepped back. "Get out," he said to Thomas, "before I forget my manners entirely." They rode off slowly, taking their time, making it clear they were leaving by choice, not because they'd been intimidated. Mara watched them go, her heart still hammering, her hand still on Caleb's arm. When they were finally out of sight, Caleb turned to her. "That's what you'd be going back to," he said quietly. "Men like that, thinking they can make decisions for you, control your life because you're a woman and they know better. Is that really what you want?" "Of course not." "Then why are you packing?" She'd forgotten about the carpetbag sitting visible just inside the door. Caleb must have seen it while she was outside. There was no point denying it now. "Because I thought it was the right thing to do," she said. "I still think it might be." "For who? Not for me." Not for you, based on what you just told Thomas. So, who's it right for? For everyone else. For the town, for Lansing, for all the people judging us. Since when do we care what they think? Since their opinions determine whether we eat next month. Mara pulled her arm free, suddenly exhausted. You keep acting like we can just ignore the world and make this work through stubbornness alone. But we can't. We need money. We need the bank. We need people to do business with us. And right now, all of that is impossible because they've decided what we are. Then let them decide. We know the truth. That's enough. It's not enough when we're starving. It's not enough when Lansing takes this place. It's not enough when you're back where I found you, dying alone because you were too proud to admit you needed help. Caleb flinched like she'd struck him. That's not fair. None of this is fair. That's what I'm trying to tell you. They stood there in the yard, the sun beating down mercilessly, the weight of impossible choices pressing on them from all sides. Mara wanted to scream, wanted to cry, wanted to somehow make him understand that she wasn't leaving because she wanted to, but because she couldn't see any other way forward. The town gathering is tomorrow night, Caleb said finally. Everyone will be there, including Lansing. So maybe it's time we stopped hiding, stopped letting people make up stories about us without pushing back. He met her eyes. Come with me. We'll face them together, tell them the truth, and let them make their judgments to our faces instead of behind our backs. That's insane. They'll eat us alive. Probably, but at least we'll go down fighting instead of running away. Mara wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the ways this could backfire, but something in his words caught her. Going down fighting. That's what she'd done when she'd confronted Thomas just now. That's what she'd been doing since she stepped off that train and refused to crumble under the weight of rejection. Maybe running wasn't who she was anymore. All right, she heard herself say. We'll go. We'll tell them the truth. And when it doesn't change anything, when they still treat us like dirt, at least we'll know we tried. The town gathering was held monthly in the church social hall, a large space that served double duty for community meetings and celebrations. By the time Mara and Caleb arrived, the room was already packed. Families filled the benches, men clustered near the refreshment table, women arranged chairs in tight circles. The noise was overwhelming, conversations layering over each other, laughter, the clink of glasses and plates. It died the moment they walked in. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. The silence was so complete Mara could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. She'd worn her best dress, the one she'd been married in back when that was still the plan. Caleb had shaved, put on his only good shirt. They'd tried to look respectable, presentable. But looking at the faces staring back at them, Mara knew it didn't matter. They could have arrived in formal wear and it wouldn't have changed the judgment already written in every expression. Mrs. Patterson was there, sitting with a group of women who immediately leaned together and started whispering. Dutch Harrison stood near the back, his face carefully neutral. Thomas Garrett was across the room with a young woman Mara didn't recognize. Pretty, delicate, everything Mara wasn't. He looked away when he saw her looking. And there, near the front, was Robert Lansing, talking with several other well-dressed men who were probably the town's other major business owners and landholders. Caleb's hand found hers and squeezed once. A reminder. They were in this together. They made their way to a pair of empty chairs near the side wall, the crowd partying around them like they carried disease. Mara sat down feeling like every eye in the room was cataloging her every flaw, every imperfection, every reason she didn't belong. The meeting started with announcements, repairs needed on the school, plans for a new well, discussion of water rights disputes. Mara barely heard any of it. She was too focused on waiting, on preparing herself for whatever was coming. When the formal business concluded, the moderator, a man named Stevens who owned the livery, opened the floor to general concerns. Several people spoke about minor issues. Then Lansing stood. I'd like to address a matter that affects the moral character of our community, he began, his voice carrying easily. We have among us individuals who are living in a manner that sets a poor example, particularly for our young people. He didn't look at them. Didn't have to. Everyone knew who he meant. Now, I'm not one to judge how people conduct their private lives, but when that conduct becomes public, when it affects the community's standing, we have a responsibility to address it. Lansing's tone was reasonable, measured, which somehow made it worse. Mr. Turner owes my bank a considerable sum. He's made no effort to repay it, and rather than facing his obligations honestly, He's taken up with a woman of questionable character, living openly in sin. That's a lie. Caleb was on his feet before Mara could stop him. We're not living in sin. We're partners, working together to save a ranch that's worth saving. Partners. Lansing's smile was thin. Is that what you're calling it? Because the rest of us have a different word for it. Then the rest of you are wrong. Caleb's voice was hard. Mara Collins saved my life when I was dying. She's worked harder than anyone in this room to make something out of nothing. She deserves respect, not this garbage. She deserves honest work and an honest life, Lansing countered. Not whatever arrangement you two have concocted out there. If you had any honor, Turner, you'd either marry her properly or send her away before you ruin her completely. The word ruin hit Mara like a physical blow, as if she was something that could be damaged, spoiled, made worthless by association. The same old story, dressed up in concern for morality. She stood, her legs shaking but her voice steady. I don't need Mr. Turner to marry me, she said clearly. I don't need him to send me away. I don't need any of you to approve of my choices or understand my life. I came here to build something, and that's what I'm doing. If that offends your sensibilities, that's your problem, not mine. Watch your tone, girl. This from one of the other men near Lansing, a rancher named Coleman. You're in no position to be making demands or speeches. I'm not making demands. I'm stating facts. Mara looked around the room, meeting eyes that wanted to look away. I know what you think of me. I've heard the whispers, seen the judgment, but here's what you don't know. When Caleb Turner was dying from an infected wound, when he'd been abandoned by this town, I was the one who kept him alive. I cleaned his wound, fed him, got him strong enough to work again. And we've been working every day since, trying to make that ranch productive, trying to pay back what's owed. With what money? Lansing asked. You're broke. You've got nothing. We've got each other, Caleb said. That counts for something. It counts for nothing, Lansing shot back. Romance doesn't pay debts, Turner, and it doesn't excuse the fact that you're setting a terrible example for decent people, living with a woman outside of marriage, pretending it's respectable. I was rejected at a train station, Mara interrupted, her voice rising. Left stranded by a man who decided I wasn't good enough the moment he saw me. I could have given up right then. Could have crawled back home and accepted that I was worthless. Instead, I chose to survive. I chose to work. I chose to matter. And if that makes me indecent in your eyes, so be it. The room was silent again, but it felt different now. Some of the faces looked uncomfortable. A few women were whispering to each other, their expressions thoughtful rather than condemning. My family owned land back east, Caleb said, his voice carrying in the quiet. My brothers inherited it because they were older, because that's how it works. I came out here with nothing and built something anyway. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Then drought hit, then disease, then an accident that should have killed me. I lost everything except the land itself. I was ready to die. Wanted to, honestly. Then Mara showed up and decided I didn't get that choice. He looked at Lansing directly. You want to know why I haven't paid you? Because I've been learning to use my arm again. Because we've been trying to make a ranch work with no money and no help from anyone. Because we've been doing it alone while this town decided we were worthless. But we're still here. We're still fighting, and we're not going anywhere. Pretty words, Lansing said. But they don't change the facts. You owe me $300. You can't pay. End of story. Give us 6 more months, Mara said. We'll make payments. We'll prove the ranch can produce. If we can't, you can have everything and we'll walk away without complaint. I've heard those promises before. Not from us, you haven't. Caleb moved to stand beside Mara, presenting a united front. We're asking for a chance, that's all. A fair chance to prove we're worth the investment. Lansing looked around the room, gauging the reaction. Mara could see him calculating, weighing public opinion against his own interests. Several people were nodding slightly, murmuring to their neighbors. Not everyone, but enough to matter. If I extend this loan, Lansing said slowly, it sets a precedent. Every other debtor will expect the same treatment. We're not asking for special treatment, Mara said. We're asking for fair treatment. There's a difference. A woman stood up near the middle of the room, someone Mara recognized from the boarding house, one of Mrs. Patterson's regular customers. Her name was Ellen Morris, and she'd always been kind, if distant. Mr. Lansing, if I may, she said hesitantly. I've seen Miss Collins working at the boarding house. She's a hard worker, doesn't complain, does quality work. If she says she'll make payments, I believe her. Thank you, Mrs. Morris. Mrs. Patterson herself stood, surprising everyone. I let Miss Collins go because of pressure from others, not because of her work. That was wrong of me. If she's willing, I'd like to offer her position back. Mara stared at the older woman, caught completely off guard. Mrs. Patterson's expression was stern as always, but there was something else there too. Respect, maybe. Or at least recognition. Dutch Harrison spoke up from the back. I can extend credit for basic supplies. Nothing excessive, but enough to keep them going while they get established. One by one, a few other voices joined in. Not many. Most of the room remained silent, faces closed off and judging. But enough. Enough to show that not everyone had already written them off. Lansing watched this unfold, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed. 6 months, he said. But I want to see regular payments, even small ones. Proof that you're making an effort and not just stringing me along. You'll get them, Caleb promised. And for heaven's sake, Turner, marry the woman. Lansing's voice was sharp. I don't care what your actual arrangement is, but for the sake of everyone's peace of mind, make it legal. That's not a suggestion. The words hung in the air between them. Mara felt her face go hot, felt every eye in the room shift to watch how they'd respond. This wasn't how she'd imagined being proposed to, as a condition of a loan extension in front of a hostile audience, with nothing romantic or kind about it. She looked at Caleb and saw her own confusion reflected back. They'd never discussed marriage, never even considered it as far as she knew. They were partners, friends maybe, but this? We'll consider it, Caleb said carefully, which was probably the most diplomatic answer possible under the circumstances. You do that. Lansing sat down, effectively ending the discussion. The meeting broke up shortly after, people filing out in small groups, their voices low and speculative. Mara and Caleb stayed in their seats, neither quite ready to face the walk home, the conversation that was now inevitable. Mrs. Patterson stopped by on her way out. 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, Miss Collins. Don't be late. Yes, ma'am, and thank you. Don't thank me yet. You still have to actually do the work. But her tone was softer than her words. When they were finally alone in the emptying hall, Caleb turned to her. That went better than expected, he said. Also worse. I can't decide which. Lansing just told us to get married. Mara's voice came out strangled. In front of the entire town. I heard. Caleb ran a hand through his hair. Look, we don't have to actually do it. We can say we're considering it. Let people assume what they want. Is that what you want? To lie about it? I don't know what I want. He looked at her directly. What do you want? It was a good question. What did she want? She'd come to Arizona expecting marriage to a stranger, had been rejected, had built something entirely different with Caleb. Marriage hadn't been part of that equation. They'd become partners, equals working toward a common goal. Adding romance to that seemed complicated, messy, dangerous. But maybe it was also honest. I want us to keep working together, she said slowly, feeling her way through the words. I want the ranch to succeed. I want to prove we're worth something. Everything else, I don't know. We can figure it out later. Later sounds good. Caleb stood and offered his hand. Let's go home. She took it, and they walked out together into the cool evening air. The town was quiet now, most people already back in their homes. Stars were starting to appear overhead, brilliant and indifferent. It wasn't perfect. Most of the town still thought they were shameful. Lansing's extension came with strings attached. They still had no real money and mountains of debt. But they had 6 months. They had work. They had each other. And walking back toward the ranch under that vast sky, Mara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt like maybe they had a chance. The work started again the next morning, but it felt different now. The weight of secrecy was gone, replaced by something harder but cleaner. Accountability. People knew where they stood. People were watching. That meant every choice mattered. Every dollar counted. Every day had to produce something measurable. Mara was back at the boarding house by 6, just like Mrs. Patterson demanded. The older woman didn't acknowledge their conversation from the town meeting, just handed Mara a list of tasks and walked away. But the work was there, and the pay would come, and that was what mattered. Caleb spent the morning at Dutch's store, working out a system. Dutch would extend credit for essentials, flour, salt, basic supplies, and Caleb would pay it back in labor, repairs, deliveries, whatever Dutch needed. It wasn't generous, but it was fair, and fair was more than they'd had before. By the end of the first week, they'd established a rhythm. Mara worked 6 hours at the boarding house, came home to work the ranch. Caleb did odd jobs around town in the mornings, worked the ranch in the afternoons. They ate dinner together, reviewed their finances, planned the next day. It was exhausting, but it was progress. The marriage question hung between them like smoke, present but not solid enough to grasp. Neither of them brought it up directly. They'd dance around it occasionally, making jokes that weren't quite jokes, asking questions that weren't quite questions. You know, if we actually went through with it, Caleb said one evening while they were mending fence, we'd probably have to have some kind of ceremony. Town would expect it. Probably. Mara hammered a nail into a post, focused on keeping it straight. Mrs. Patterson would insist on proper arrangements, flowers, witnesses, the whole performance. Sounds exhausting. Everything's exhausting. Doesn't mean we don't do it. Caleb looked at her sideways. Are we actually discussing this, or are we just talking around it again? I don't know. Are we? He laughed, shaking his head. You're impossible. You're the one who brought it up. Fair point. They worked in silence for a while, the sun beating down, sweat making their hands slip on the tools. Finally, Caleb set down his hammer. I need to say something, and I'm just going to say it straight because I'm not good at the fancy version. He turned to face her fully. I don't know if what we have is love. I don't know if I even know what that's supposed to feel like, but I know I trust you more than I've trusted anyone. I know you make this life bearable. I know that when I think about the future, I can't picture it without you in it. Mara's throat went tight. That's not nothing. It's not everything either. I can't promise you romance or grand gestures or any of the things women are supposed to want. But I can promise you partnership, respect, a share in whatever we build together. What if we can't build anything? What if we fail? Then we fail together. That's still better than succeeding alone. She thought about Thomas Garrett, standing on that platform, his face closing off the moment he saw her. She thought about all the men before him who'd looked right through her, decided she wasn't worth their time. She thought about the life she'd expected, always second best, always grateful for scraps, always trying to make herself small enough to be acceptable. This wasn't that life. Ask me properly, she said. Caleb blinked. What? If you're going to propose, do it right. Don't just stand there talking about practicalities. Ask me. He looked terrified for a moment, then something settled in his expression. He didn't get down on one knee, his bad leg wouldn't have supported it anyway, but he took her hand, his grip warm and calloused. Mara Collins, will you marry me? Not because the town expects it, not because Lansing demanded it, but because I want you to. Because I think we could make something good together. Because you're the bravest person I've ever met, and I'd be proud to stand beside you. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't the proposal she'd imagined as a young girl, full of romance and grand declarations. But it was honest, and it was his, and it was enough. Yes, she said, I'll marry you. They stood there as the afternoon sun, hands clasped, both of them a little surprised by what they'd just done. Then Caleb pulled her into an awkward hug that made them both laugh, and it felt right in a way that had nothing to do with what they were supposed to feel and everything to do with what they actually did. The wedding happened 3 weeks later in the same church social hall where they'd faced down the town. Mrs. Patterson insisted on organizing it, which meant it was efficient, practical, and utterly devoid of unnecessary sentiment. Dutch gave Mara away since she had no family present. Ellen Morris stood as witness, along with a few other townspeople who'd softened toward them. Mara wore a simple dress that Mrs. Patterson had helped her sew. Nothing fancy, but clean and well made. Caleb wore his good shirt again, freshly washed. They stood before the minister and said their vows in clear, steady voices, meaning every word. When the minister pronounced them married, Caleb kissed her briefly, and the small crowd applauded politely. It wasn't joyful or celebratory. It was respectful, which felt like a victory in itself. The real change came that night, back at the ranch. They'd been living in the same space for months, but marriage shifted something fundamental. This was their home now, legally and officially. They were partners not just in work, but in life, bound together by more than circumstance. They sat on the porch as the sun set, drinking the bottle of wine Dutch had given them as a wedding gift. How do you feel? Caleb asked. Married. Mara took a sip, letting the wine warm her throat. Strange. Good, though. Like something settled into place. Yeah. He stretched his legs out, his bad arm resting across his lap. We should probably discuss sleeping arrangements, now that it's official. We should. Mara felt heat rise in her face despite herself. I mean, we're adults, married adults. We can figure it out. We can take our time, no rush. No rush, she agreed, grateful for his understanding. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. In the distance, one of their cattle lowed. The land stretched out dark and vast around them, full of challenges still to face, but also possibilities. The next morning, they woke to find a wagon parked in their yard. Dutch Harrison sat on the driver's seat, and beside him were 3 wooden crates. "Wedding present," he said when they came out to investigate. "Figured you could use a proper start." The crates contained chickens, a rooster, and 5 hens, healthy and young. Mara felt tears sting her eyes. "Dutch, we can't afford—" "Didn't ask you to afford anything. I said it's a gift." He climbed down from the wagon. "Besides, I'm investing in my own interests. You folks get on your feet, you'll be buying supplies from me regular. Good business to help you succeed." "Thank you," Caleb said, his voice rough with emotion. "This means more than you know. Just don't let them die. I'd hate to waste good chickens on bad management." But Dutch was smiling as he said it. They spent the rest of the morning settling the chickens into their newly repaired coop. By afternoon, one of the hens had already laid an egg, and Mara held it in her palm like it was made of gold. "Fresh eggs," she said wonderingly. "We can eat them, sell the extras. This could actually work." "It will work." Caleb put his arm around her shoulders. "We'll make it work." The months that followed were hard, but they were productive hard, not desperate hard. The chickens laid regularly, giving them eggs to eat and sell. Mara's wages from the boarding house came in steady. Caleb picked up more work around town as people saw he was reliable, that his word meant something. They made small payments to Lansing every month, never as much as he probably wanted, but enough to show they were serious. The ranch began to transform. Small repairs accumulated into real improvements. They fixed the barn roof, rebuilt the porch, cleared and planted a vegetable garden. The cattle stayed healthy through the winter. In spring, 2 of the cows gave birth, bringing their herd to 10 head. It wasn't wealth, but it was growth. The town's attitude shifted gradually, almost imperceptibly. People still whispered, still judged, but there was less venom in it now. Some folks even started nodding to them on the street, acknowledging their existence if not quite accepting them. Mrs. Patterson remained strict and demanding, but she also started inviting Mara to sit and have tea on slow afternoons, talking about town gossip and practical matters like equals. Thomas Garrett got married that spring to the delicate young woman Mara had seen him with at the town meeting. She heard about it secondhand and felt nothing except mild curiosity about how he was doing. That part of her life felt distant now, like something that had happened to someone else. One afternoon in late summer, Mara was working in the garden when she heard horses approaching. She straightened, wiping dirt from her hands, and saw Robert Lansing riding up alone. Her first instinct was worry. Had they missed a payment? Made a mistake in their accounting? But Lansing's expression wasn't hostile, just businesslike. "Mrs. Turner," he said, tipping his hat. "Your husband around?" "He's in the barn. I can get him." "No need. I can talk to you just as well." He dismounted, pulling a leather folder from his saddlebag. "I've been reviewing your account. You've made every payment on time for 6 months now. Small payments, but consistent. We're doing our best." "I can see that. The ranch looks better than it has in years." He opened the folder, showing her a series of numbers she'd have to examine closely to fully understand. "I'm prepared to restructure your debt. Lower interest rate, longer repayment period, make it more manageable long term." Mara stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because it's good business. You're proving you can manage the property, make it productive. That makes you a better risk than you were 6 months ago." He closed the folder. "Also, my wife has been pestering me about it. Apparently you've impressed several of the town ladies with your work ethic. They think I'm being too hard on you." "Are you?" Lansing smiled slightly. "Probably. But business is business. The new terms stand if you want them." Caleb came out of the barn then, saw Lansing, and his expression immediately went cautious. "Problem?" "No problem," Mara said quickly. "Mr. Lansing is offering to restructure our loan. Better terms." She watched understanding dawn on Caleb's face, followed by something she'd rarely seen from him, hope mixed with disbelief. "What's the catch?" he asked. "No catch. Just business." Lansing handed him the folder. "Look it over. Let me know by the end of the week. If you agree to the terms, we'll draw up new papers." After he left, Mara and Caleb sat at the kitchen table and went through the numbers carefully. The new terms were significantly better. Lower monthly payments, more time to pay off the principal. It was still a lot of money, still years of work ahead, but it was manageable. Actually, genuinely manageable. We might actually pull this off, Caleb said, sounding stunned. We might actually keep this place. We will keep this place. Mara took his hand across the table. We've already proven we can. Now we just have to keep doing it. That night they celebrated by cooking a real meal. Chicken from their own coop, vegetables from their own garden, bread baked from flour they'd earned honestly. It wasn't fancy, but it tasted better than anything Mara could remember eating. The flavor of success, of security, of something built with their own hands. They ate on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The land stretched out before them, harsh and beautiful, still full of challenges but also full of promise. Their land now, in a way it hadn't been before. Not just legally, but earned. I've been thinking, Caleb said, setting down his plate, about what comes next. We can't just survive forever. We need to actually thrive. What did you have in mind? Expanding the herd, not huge, but steady growth. Maybe get a few more chickens, start selling eggs more regularly in town. Fix up the old bunkhouse, hire seasonal help when we can afford it. He turned to her. Build something real. Something lasting. Something to pass on, Mara added softly. He looked at her sharply. You thinking about children? Maybe. Eventually. Are you? I don't know. Never really pictured myself as a father. He paused, considering. But I never pictured myself as a husband either, and that's working out better than I expected. Mara laughed. High praise. I'm serious. You've changed everything, Mara. Made me believe things could actually get better instead of just worse. That's not nothing. You did the same for me. She leaned against his shoulder. I came here expecting to be chosen by someone. Thought that's what I needed. Someone to decide I was good enough. But what I actually needed was to choose myself. Choose what I wanted, what I was willing to fight for. You gave me the space to do that. We gave each other that space. Yeah, we did. They sat in silence as full darkness fell, the stars emerging one by one overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, and one of their chickens clucked sleepily in response. The sounds of life, of home, of a future they were building together. 2 years later, Mara stood on the same ridge where she'd once looked down at the dying ranch and decided to stay. The view had changed. The barn had a new roof and fresh paint. The house had an addition, a second bedroom they'd built themselves over the course of 6 months. The chicken coop now held 20 birds. The cattle herd had grown to 18 head. The vegetable garden was thriving, producing more than they could eat and allowing them to sell the surplus in town. But more than the physical changes, something else had shifted. The ranch felt alive in a way it hadn't before. It felt permanent. Caleb joined her on the ridge, his arm around her waist, and she leaned into him naturally. They did that now, touched without thinking about it, occupied the same space with easy familiarity. The marriage had grown into something neither of them had quite expected. Not grand passion, but something steadier and more durable. Partnership that had deepened into genuine affection, respect that had evolved into love of a practical, enduring kind. You thinking about the past? He asked. About how far we've come. She turned to look at him. His face had filled out, the gauntness gone. His arm had healed as well as it was going to. He'd never have full strength in it, but he'd adapted, learned to work around the limitation. Remember when we had nothing? When everyone expected us to fail? Some people still expect us to fail. But we haven't, and we won't. No, he agreed, we won't. They stood there as the sun set, painting the land in golden shadow. Down below, the ranch they'd saved together waited, solid and real, and theirs. The town had never fully accepted them, not in the way that meant being embraced into the center of community life. They were always slightly outside, slightly apart, but that had stopped mattering somewhere along the way. They'd built their own community of 2, expanded it slowly to include a few trusted friends, and that was enough. Mrs. Patterson still employed Mara, though now it was more out of genuine respect than necessity. Dutch had become a real friend, stopping by regularly to check on them and share news. Even Lansing had mellowed, occasionally asking Caleb's advice on ranch management for other properties the bank held. As for Thomas Garrett, Mara had seen him in town a few times over the years. They'd nod politely if they passed on the street, nothing more. His life had gone in one direction, hers in another. She didn't wish him ill, but she didn't think about him much either. He'd done her a favor, really, by rejecting her that day. He'd forced her to find her own way instead of settling for someone else's vision of what her life should be. "We should head back," Caleb said eventually. "Getting dark." "In a minute." Mara wasn't ready to leave yet. She wanted to hold on to this moment a little longer, the peace of it, the certainty. "I want to remember this, how it feels to look at everything we've built and know it's real." "It's real," Caleb confirmed. "Every bit of it." They made their way down the ridge as the last light faded, their feet finding the familiar path easily even in the growing darkness. The ranch house glowed with lamplight ahead, welcoming them home. That night, sitting at the table they'd repaired together, eating food they'd grown together, in a home they'd saved together, Mara felt something she'd spent most of her life searching for without knowing what it was. She felt whole. Not because someone had chosen her, not because she'd become acceptable by someone else's standards, but because she'd chosen herself, fought for herself, built a life that was entirely and authentically hers. The world hadn't changed. People still judged based on appearances, still made assumptions, still wrote people off before giving them a chance. The world was exactly as cruel and arbitrary as it had always been. But she had changed. She'd learned that worth wasn't something bestowed by others. It was something you claimed for yourself and defended fiercely. That being chosen mattered less than choosing. That the right kind of partnership wasn't about being completed by someone else, but about finding someone who would stand beside you while you completed yourself. Caleb had been right that first night they'd agreed to be partners. Together was better than alone, even when together was messy and imperfect and required constant work. Maybe especially then. "What are you thinking about?" Caleb asked, watching her across the table. "Everything. Nothing. How strange life is." She smiled at him. "How I came here expecting one thing and found something completely different, something better." "Better than marriage to a stranger who rejected you? Better than marriage to anyone except you." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Same." They sat there in the lamplight, two people who'd been discarded by the world, who'd refused to stay discarded, who'd built something real from the scraps they'd been given. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't even particularly romantic by conventional standards. But it was theirs, earned through stubbornness and sweat, and refusing to accept anyone else's verdict on their worth. And that made it better than any story they could have been handed. Outside, the Arizona night settled over the land, vast and indifferent and beautiful. The ranch stood against it, small but solid, a testament to the fact that sometimes the best stories aren't about being rescued or chosen or transformed into something acceptable. Sometimes the best stories are about refusing to disappear, about standing your ground and building something worth keeping even when everyone says you can't, about finding someone who sees you clearly and chooses you anyway, not despite your flaws, but with full knowledge of them, about learning that the only approval that really matters is your own. Mara had come to Arizona looking for a husband, for security, for a place to belong. She'd found all of that, but not in the way she expected. She'd found it by becoming someone who didn't need to be chosen because she'd already chosen herself. And in the end, that made all the difference. The lamp burned steady on the table between them, pushing back the darkness, warming the space they'd claimed as their own. Tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, more reasons to doubt. But tonight, they had this. Proof that impossible things could become possible through sheer refusal to give up. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.